An honor to be a part of your group. So I so appreciate that you're having me here today and this morning for me and this evening for you. By trade, I am an industrial psychologist. My doctorate is in industrial organizational psychology from the university or from Kansas State University here in the States. And I now, as she mentioned, I teach at Texas A&M University, and I also consult with organizations across the country on engagement. And my passion is really working with women in the workplace on engagement and balance. So for the past 15 years, I have been working with organizations to foster employee engagement in the workplace through the implementation of talent management solutions. So job design, organizational design, selection and assessment tools, performance management, training and development, all of these talent management solutions that I'm sure you're familiar with that appear to have one purpose of role clarity and development, but they're all part of employee engagement. And what I have learned is that I have worked with these organizations that they are often missing the mark when it comes to employee engagement because they are aiming blindly at moving targets. Employee engagement is very personal, and it's certainly not a one size fits all. So tonight I'm going to be sharing with you 5 steps that I have found to foster employee-led engagement and hopefully help you understand the value of focusing on the employee-driven engagement as opposed to the organizational level engagement. Let's see. Here we go. Okay, might just be a little bit slow. Sorry if it advances again. So as I was finishing up my doctorate, I had the opportunity to meet with a former alumni of our program who happened to be an executive at a local consulting group here in the States. This pretty prestigious group, and I was really excited that he was going to give me some time to just chat about my career and consulting and if I wanted to go internal or external and all of these questions that I had. And this was before I had a cell phone. So they did exist, but I did not have one. And so I printed off my directions off of MapQuest and I hit the road fully confident that I was going to be able to get to this location no problem. Well, I was driving in downtown Kansas City and I was pretty unfamiliar with that area. And one missed turn led to a road that was not on my map and I was late. And I couldn't call him, I couldn't email him, and I just knew that he was going to be long gone by the time that I got there. And so when I walked in, I was pretty upset, I was pretty anxious, and when I saw him sitting in the booth, I just was overwhelmed with gratitude and I was on the verge of tears, as you can imagine, and he said, hey, no worries. He said, time is the best gift that you can give someone. And time really is a precious commodity. And I'm so grateful that you're spending your evening or when you're watching this recording, I'm so grateful that you're spending your time with me. But as he intended it, uh, he had the opportunity to sit and relax and take a moment out of his day and get caught up in email. And he had 3 young daughters at home and his work life was very busy and he was just sat back and got to relax for a moment. And he was thanking me for that time that I had given him to do just that. And he didn't get hung up on the frustration and the annoyance and just all of the things that he had to do. He set aside his frustration and he spent the next 45 minutes with me, 100% present in exactly what we were doing in that moment. And I think about that from time to time when I hear statistics like this. And I hope you can see all this. I probably should have just shared the presentation instead of my screen. But only 15% of employees worldwide are engaged. And this is a 2017 study, but it is up from 13% in 2013. 3 out of 4 young people entering the workforce are already looking for the next big thing. They enter the workforce disengaged and they're already looking for something else. 90% of Americans feel unfulfilled by their work. And this one just gets me maybe the most. The highest likelihood of a heart attack is at 9 a.m. Monday morning. And young working people are most susceptible to this increase in likelihood of heart attack. Now, you may say, well, Monday morning, yeah, the weekend was stressful, and so it's all coming together. But Saturdays are the lowest risk of a heart attack. So the question I have to ask is, in a world where many of us can do whatever we want, literally anything we want, we go to school to do these things, we spend years preparing ourselves, why are we so dissatisfied? And if you have a chat function, I think I saw that you do have the capability there. I would love your initial thoughts on this. Why are we so dissatisfied? And then while you're thinking here, when you hear the word engagement or engaged, what words, phrases, thoughts, feelings, or ideas come to mind? What initially pops into your head when you hear that word? Hopefully it's positive, but maybe it's not. What are some phrases that you just think of, you feel? Probably not going to be able to read those like I was hoping, but maybe I can see them another time. Okay, so let's talk about what is engagement. One definition or one version is a state of complete absorption in what you're doing. And this definition really goes back to the days of Csikszentmihalyi and the philosophy of positive psychology, and the definition or the idea of flow, where you are completely focused in what you're doing. Time stands still. You don't experience hunger. Nothing disturbs you, or you are completely engrossed in what you're doing. When athletes experience this, we call it hitting their stride. Now, organizations have a more general definition, which is the positive, fulfilling, work-related state of mind characterized by vigor, dedication, and absorption. Now, I think that we can all agree that employee engagement is often measured in organizations through employee engagement or opinion surveys, which often capture more of this job satisfaction, loyalty, agreement with leadership, and your likelihood to leave the organization. Are you thinking of looking for another job? Would you recommend this as a place to work to others? All of those are intended on capturing employee engagement, and therefore, how it is measured tends to become how we define it, which is not always the entire picture. So why does this even matter? Who cares about this whole engagement thing? Well, as HR professionals, we often talk about engagement in terms that organizations understand, care about, and ultimately will pay for. And unless it affects their bottom line, often we can't even get past the next level of leadership. And organizations care about engagement, resulting in greater productivity, quality of work, fewer sick days, lower healthcare costs, lower time to fill. And you can see the list here that you're probably very familiar with. So studies show that disengagement costs organizations up to $500 billion a year in reduced productivity and associated or related costs every single year. Now, because organizations have so much to gain, as you can see from this list, and also so much to lose, in upwards of $500 billion a year, they spend additional billions of dollars every year trying to recoup some of those costs, really focusing on engagement. And this also often comes across in terms of caring for the employee, well-being programs, things like that, which are intended to increase engagement. And some of them are very good, well-rounded programs, and some of them are really focused only on the here and now, which I will get to in just one moment. So what this ends up looking like is employees sit around and wait for the organization to engage them. They wait for their leadership to care about what they're doing and care about their overall purpose in life and to align their work directly with the organizational objectives. They sit around and wait for it, almost like it's a rite of passage for organizations to engage their employees. And when they're disengaged, it all falls back on the organization. The organization doesn't have enough wellness programs. The organization doesn't care about me as a person. The organization only wants to increase my productivity and doesn't see me. Meanwhile, the employee is taking no responsibility whatsoever in their own engagement. But the reality is the employees are the ones that really have so much to gain in these situations. Let me move this on over here. So we talk in terms of greater productivity and increase, let's see if I can go right up here maybe. Greater productivity and increased quality of work. Yes, the organization benefits from that in terms of greater success, but the employee, what this looks like for the employee is getting home earlier, being able to take breaks throughout the day, not having to work weekends or evenings because they've gotten their work done and that quality of work is high, so they feel good about the work that they're doing. We also see mental health, physical well-being, fewer doctor visits, improved longevity. The organization cares because they're losing less time on sick days and healthcare costs, which can be outrageous for organizations. But the employee benefits because they are actually healthier. They actually feel better. They are actually going to the doctor less, and they can spend their time on vacation as opposed to going to the doctor, time off instead of being sick. In my opinion, being healthier is way more valuable than just the money associated with less time off that the organization is benefiting from. We also see a more positive workplace atmosphere and greater connection. And the organization sees this positive workplace atmosphere and organizational citizenship behaviors, these helping behaviors, because it increases productivity when we help each other. But for employees, relationships with coworkers is a top reason that people leave organizations. It's also a primary influencer of overall mental well-being. So if we can improve the relationships with coworkers, the connections between each other, the way people feel about those that they work with and the atmosphere where they're working, it improves their overall sense of engagement across the board. We also see a greater sense of satisfaction, meaning, and purpose, also important keys to overall well-being. And this is above and beyond this connection of the work you're doing with overall organizational objectives, which is what we always do. We want to connect employees with values and connect them with the organizational mission, which is great. But to have an employee feel personally connected to the work that they're doing because they're passionate about something, not because we have artificially connected their own values with the values of the organization, but because they internally have a set of values that they're going on. This opens up so many more doors, and it creates a sense of engagement that is far beyond the organization's success. I mean, I can get behind an organization's success. I really can, but I care more about the employee feeling passionate about what they're doing and having a sense of connection with their work on a daily basis. And I think that shows dividends in terms of employment, employee engagement, and benefits that are far beyond making connections to the work the organization is doing. All right, so next question. If engagement is so important and employers spend so much money on it, why are employees still so disengaged? And if you have some thoughts on this, I'd love to see them in the chat, maybe connect with each other and share your thoughts here. And also, why are some people engaged despite their circumstances while others just can't be moved? No matter what programs you put in place, no matter how much you connect with what they're doing, they just are always disengaged, withdrawn, and burnt out. So what's the deal? Let's talk about this here. Before 1990, so engagement is a fairly new topic. It's fairly recent. This was definitely before my time in the field, but I do have coworkers who were around before engagement was really talked about in this way. And so pre-1990, we talked in terms of job satisfaction. That was really the primary focus on this type of work, is increasing job satisfaction. In 1990, I kind of did some work and identified this concept of bringing one's whole self into their work. He did some research and said that those who are bringing their own skills and interests into their work, the work that they're doing, they are more passionate about their work. And that he defined as engagement. They are more engaged in their work. By 2010, we were already starting to see a shift here with Towers Watson talking about engagement in terms of commitment to the company. And then today, this is what many of us are familiar with, going above and beyond to benefit the organization. Less focus on individual skills and interests and passion for the work that they're doing, but directing that in terms of how the organization is going to benefit. And we start to see that definition change based on how we're measuring it. It has really become a term used to meet the current need of the organization. It's kind of a catch-all. And as I teach my students that buzzwords such as engagement must be clearly defined by all parties before we can define it, assess it, do anything with it in terms of improving it, because it can be defined in so many different ways. And what one leader thinks that they are talking about in terms of engagement could be something else. It's this catch-all bucket. So when I was doing some research for this about employee engagement, the most common Google search is how to boost employee engagement. And the reality is, it is not their job to boost employee engagement. It is not a leader's job. It is not an organization's job. Instead, it is their job to foster an environment where an employee can develop and apply their own engagement. So in my first, quote, real job after I finished my dissertation and had my doctorate, I was working for a Fortune 50 manufacturing company, and I was the selection assessment specialist, and I had been hired to revamp and redesign the entire selection program and process. Huge deal for me. I was super excited. So when I had the opportunity to meet with the Chief Human Resource Officer in charge of this entire organization, I spent the entire time talking about my programs and my process and what I was going to do and how I was going to completely transform this. And I was just thrilled to have an opportunity to share that with her. And she stopped me and she said, "Cheryl, your project is this big." It was so small to her that it did not even register on her radar. In fact, before I had outlined everything about my project, she just had a general idea, enough that they needed to hire someone. But her organization was so large, I didn't even register at that point. And it crushed me. This is my whole world. This is what I had been hired to do. But I did not recognize just how many things that she had on her plate. When you're talking about a Chief Human Resource Officer, I had the opportunity to ask her anything about her job and the different aspects of the organization, but I was so focused on my own work that I missed that opportunity. And it is human nature to see ourselves right in the middle, in the center. And we see things only from our own perspective. And we think that everything is revolving around whatever it is that we're working on. But if we slow down and stand back, we will see that our perspective is just one part of everything that's going on in our lives.
Excuse me, ma'am. Sorry for interrupting. There are some comments in the chat box. Can you please look into that?
Sure.
Yeah, thank you.
Let's see. Oops. Okay, let's see if I can do this. I think that I saw chat box was up here. Okay, so is it the will issue, willingness to connect with the organization? There are some aspects of engagement that involve willingness to connect with the organization. So I'm definitely going to get into some of these pieces of engagement and that really talk more about the overall sense of engagement with life that transcends the current situation. And there's definitely a role that the organization takes and that leaders take in terms of supporting that environment where an organization feels connected to the organization, because that is absolutely a part of engagement, and how we currently define it in terms of connection. So when we say the word willingness, willingness, ability, having a skill to do that, all of those aspects come into play when it comes to engagement. We really can't tap into someone, understand exactly where they're coming from, whether it's willingness or ability. And so that's one thing that leaders really have to understand their employees to kind of tap into more of those components, which I will talk about in just a moment. So I hope that I address some of these questions. Engagement by HR only. Yep, absolutely. All departments need to be involved in that. Right person is not at the right place, so they are not engaged. Absolutely, having the employee in the right place at the right time is a huge component of engagement. And I will talk about this in a moment with state versus trait engagement and having the situation just right. But as an industrial psychologist, that's a huge part of my job in terms of selection and assessment and defining programs that are going to create an environment where the right person is in the right role. Now, if we have the wrong person in the wrong role, that does influence their engagement. And so that is an important first step. It's kind of that state side, which I'll talk to. And if I don't address all of these questions by the end, please continue to chat. And as you can see, I can't see the chats as they pop up. So I appreciate you jumping in. Please feel free to do that. Let's see, many times they are so exhausted that they just feel they should relax and do nothing. Yeah, absolutely. We are too burnt out. We are too worn out. And part of that is because we are running around doing too many things that are misaligned with our true purpose. And I love talking about this to women. I get pretty fired up about it. Women in particular, men can benefit from this too, but we have a struggle with compartmentalization. And as I will talk about in a moment, it's like an ocean, which things just kind of spread and get mixed together. And if we need to be better about taking things off of our plate that do not align with our purpose. And some of us can do that, and some of us struggle with that a little bit more. Household responsibilities, if you are a working parent, motherhood is a vocation of itself. It's a full-time job in itself. And so how well you scrub the floors and how well you prepare dinner is not necessarily part of your purpose in life. It is a key responsibility. It's something that must get done. But if you can eliminate some of these and set realistic expectations, it can get rid of some of the burnout, eliminate some of that, so you have more mental energy to focus on the things that are going to align you with your true purpose. That might not have been what you meant, but I love that topic. Okay, engagement is seen as an HR pushed activity. Absolutely, and it is so unfortunate. It is so disheartening because it is an incredible tool for productivity, engagement, and well-being are hand in hand. And HR are the ones that are seen as caring most for people, being most concerned about the people side. And so we all get tucked in there, and we care more about the individual versus other aspects of the organization, which are directly connected with productivity, output, success or failure of the organization. And as HR, we have this entire bucket of the labor force of connecting the individuals within that organization to the output. And it's most important to, if we can take a step back and say, yes, the organization's success is important, but we are focusing on the individual. If you can get that individual level right, the success takes care of itself. And that's my focus here on this presentation. I would love to take this outside of HR and all leaders. What you will see in this presentation is this is not an HR thing. This is being a good leader thing. And if we can have leaders who are doing their job as leaders, the engagement will follow. And I know this because part of my job is to do leadership assessment feedback reports and end of year 360 programs for different organizations. And time after time, regardless of which part of the organization they work in, those employees that are most engaged have leaders that are doing exactly what I'm going to walk through here today. But HR takes that upon themselves to make sure the leadership understands these things. And that's where our role really comes in. It is not an HR initiative. It is an organizational initiative that HR happens to be the face of. And if organizations can start seeing that more and more, we'll be able to get our foot in the door and promote these programs better. Okay, in this current time of yes, we will networking. Is there a new trend or new engagement model organizations follow? I definitely will talk about how it's all becoming mixed in a little bit more, and I think that my approach really fits that well. So I hope that I answer that question. So please stay tuned for that. Okay, and I will bounce back in here at the end. Make sure I leave time for discussion because this is really good. I'm glad that y'all are interested in this. Okay, so one more thought on this before I change the slide is that your perspective, although we often put it right in the middle, we may be on the outskirts of someone else's reality. And that's very important to remember and stay focused on as leaders as we are trying to promote our engagement programs within the organization. I just need to get it back over here. Let's see. Okay, so as leaders, we often put ourselves right in the center of an employee's life, and we say we're the center and everything about the organization goes around that. And that is just not the case at all. In reality, the organization isn't the center. And, you know, as we can see here, it's the mom, the dad, the student, the blogger, the entrepreneur, the community member, and work is only one small part of their entire pie. So rather than trying to force employees to recognize how important their job is, we as leadership need to recognize that we may not even be the biggest piece of that pie, and they have so much more going on. In viewing engagement from the employee's perspective is the first step to actually impacting it. And I would like to know what percentage of your pie is work? Is it a large percentage, maybe a small percentage, 50%, 80%, 10%? This is very personal and it differs from one person to the next. We can't just say, take our 8 or 10-hour work day or 40-hour work week and divide that out by the number of hours. It doesn't work like that. So I'm just curious, what percentage of your pie is work? Maybe you've never thought about it this way. I never did until I started trying to break it down. I just assumed, you know, you think work-life balance, and so it must be a huge percentage. Okay, so research is showing that the impact of engagement, fulfillment, and well-being actually spill over from one area of life to the next. So when we talk about the benefits of engagement, it's not just for work benefits. This is all around life. Think of it like an ocean. You drop in the benefits and they just smear around. And this was related to one of those questions about, you know, this new world that we're living in, where we're working from home, we're not necessarily removed. There are additional struggles that we're facing. This is our ocean. This is our large pie, and those pie pieces don't sit nicely like a well-baked pie. It's like a pudding pie that hasn't set yet, and you lift one up and it all kind of smears together. That's how engagement works. That's how life works. It all mixes in together, and we need to stop thinking about it in terms of a dichotomy. Especially women, I have found we have a harder time compartmentalizing this, but as we are taking on more non-traditional work arrangements, more and more people are being impacted by this idea of an ocean versus a dichotomy. So you've heard the term work-life balance, work on one side, life on the other. And that just doesn't capture it. One, it's not a dichotomy, but two, life work is part of life. How do you separate life and work? I've never understood this. And we've started to see a shift to work family balance to show those differences. But I really struggle with so many parts of my life that don't fit nicely in there. What about side gigs? A lot of people are doing blogging these days, or they have a side business that they're trying to run. Their faith plays an important role in their activities, community involvement, hobbies, charity work, caring for parents, which is outside of typical what we think of as family responsibilities. Especially here in the States, we often think of children, but now we have these sandwich generations where we're caring for parents. A lot of people are homeschooling, and that may become a larger part of society. And then socializing, all of these, that's not really family, but it's not work either. So where does it fit? Did y'all have these merry-go-rounds back in the day? These were really popular in the 80s and 90s, and occasionally you'll still see one around, but it's a big metal platform with handles to hold on to. And what you did was you get on it, and all the kids would spread out, and then someone would push it, and you make it go in a circle. But if everybody was gathered at one side, it got wompy. So you really needed to spread out. And that is, what we're talking about in this pie, in this ocean. Everything needs to balance. Work is life, and it's not a matter of balancing work with everything else. It is balancing it all. And we as leaders cannot influence engagement without understanding that. And I'm not talking about HR leaders. I'm talking about leaders across the board, all the way up to the CEO of an organization. So let's really get into the meat. Should I take a peek at the chat or keep going? Okay. Keep going until you stop me. All right, so let's really get into it. Researchers have recognized that there isn't just one type of engagement, there are actually two: state and trait. And you can see down at the bottom, I have the state. So when we talk about state engagement, this is absorption in your work at this moment in time. It's dependent on these day-to-day circumstances and the momentary situations. And we're talking about distraction, being in the right job, in the right time. The concept of flow, which is really difficult if you are distracted by your phone going off or people talking, which is why it's very difficult to achieve this state-based engagement at home with children running around, not being in your right environment, thinking about the laundry. You just can't get into complete absorption of your work. So state engagement says if the situation is just right, if the stars align, and if I'm in the right mood, I will be deeply engaged in my work. If my manager says the right thing this morning, if they walk around the way that I think that they should, if they strive to connect me, if I feel a connection to the ultimate goals of the organization, all of these things influence my current state engagement. So I think some of the questions in the chat about connecting with the organization, this is all state-based because it's part of the environment or the circumstances that you're surrounding yourself with at any given point in time. And right after, say, a really nice appreciation day, or the holidays and everyone's feeling really great about each other, or a manager has just come back from a training and they're doing all the right things and saying all the right things, that can really boost engagement. State engagement, temporary engagement, engagement in this moment. And 80% of us operate here. It comes more naturally, not completely naturally, but it comes more naturally. And when you look at answers to the question, that Google search of how to boost employee engagement, the answers primarily focus on state engagement. We spend more time here as organizations, we spend more time here as employees. But I would like for us to talk about trait-based engagement. And this is where I'm going to spend most of my energy here. This is a more general, positive view on work and life. There are a more general level of energy one brings to activities. So it's closely related to this notion of intrinsic motivation and optimism. So just enjoying the work that you're doing, this overall aura of optimism, seeing the positive in things, enjoying life for the sake of it. This explains more of why some people are engaged in their lives in general, and others are not. They never seem happy. It's always too hot, or it's always raining, or it's too cold. It's too loud in here. The organization is not trying hard enough. And so when we see people who are engaged or enjoying life despite their circumstances, they are operating from this place of trait engagement. It transcends the situation, and it starts to dye that water a different color, and that color blends across the ocean that we talked about previously. It has the greatest correlation to the benefits of engagement. So state engagement tends to be more fleeting. Trait engagement is more consistent and has stronger impact on overall results because it's consistent. We see those results better. Where state engagement, it's hard to make correlations when it's constantly bouncing up and down. Sadly, only 10% of the population operate here. It doesn't come as naturally, and we focus on it less. But the positive is it is trainable. It's something we can develop. And I teach the skill of engagement. I love building that muscle. And state engagement is also trainable, but it comes a little bit more naturally. Trait engagement takes a little bit more work, and we don't focus on it much at all. Okay, I'm going to take a brief pause and see how we're doing. Okay. All right, so building this, I don't know if that's in the way. I just keep moving it around. But building this muscle of engagement. So when we're building our engagement muscle, it doesn't matter where we build it. So like building a muscle, we all are born with muscles. Now, whether or not we use those to their full potential is dependent on how much we work them and how much we use them. So we go to gyms to work our muscles, or to places that are perfectly aligned to work every part, but we can use those muscles anywhere. We can use those muscles in life. And so building engagement is like that too. You don't have to build it where you need it in order to use it. The benefits transfer. And so we love org charts. And so this is one that is the org chart of life. So you can see the different buckets: work, hobby, side business, family. And there are different people within each of these different clusters that can directly influence engagement in any one section. But you notice the employee is the only one that runs across all sections. So if engagement is an ocean, at work, if we are focusing only on work-related engagement, we are like trying to scoop water out of that ocean and dye it red, but we're missing out the huge ocean that exists. And if we focus on that, and through letting the employee focus on it, we can better reach all aspects of that ocean. Now, I have a toddler and a preschooler at home, and it's been really tough for them this quarantine. Inability to get out, inability to see others, and they're starting to get pretty stressed out. Anyone relate to having kids? I heard a few kids earlier, so I know that many of you can relate to that as well. And we practice these deep breathing to calm down. So take 3 deep breaths in and take deep breaths out. Now, when we first started implementing this, we did not start it at the height of a tantrum. Okay, when we were laying down at night and things are calm, we say take 3 deep breaths in. Breathe in through your nose and out through your mouth. Breathe in. And we practiced it, and they got better at it. So when they started getting upset, we would say, take a deep breath, just breathe. And finally, when they became practiced and their body was rehearsed at bouncing out of that mental state of crazy and into the mental state of calm, we were then able to apply it to their crazy tantrum. We just say, just breathe, just breathe. And they were then better able because they had built the muscle memory around what it means to breathe. Now, for some, building that muscle at work in a highly stressful situation where they're not really seeing the connection, maybe they are in the wrong job and things just aren't aligning for them, it is very difficult to build the muscle of engagement in that situation. But at home or in their side business where they can more clearly see the connection of the work they're doing right now to their greater purpose, where maybe things aren't as hectic, or it's hard to say, life is crazy at home, but a different set of situations, and you have different feelings about that, then you can build that muscle there and then allow it to transfer at work. And that's what I want to get across through this process, is that as we help employees develop their trait-based engagement, we will see the benefits that they are practicing at home and practicing in their side business. We will see it in the workplace. Okay, so as leaders, this is where we often focus, state-based engagement. These are actual ideas that I pulled from those blogs and research, and you can kind of see they start to spread out a little bit, but the purpose here is that these are focusing on engagement in terms of the job and not building a skill that really transcends this current situation. And this is all stuff that I do as an industrial psychologist, so it's not bad. I hope we keep doing it, because that's where I will continue to have a job. Role clarity, job descriptions, team building events and development, regular one-on-ones with managers, performance management, goal setting, critical career pathing, clearly defined expectations, being more available, walk around more, stop by and say hi to your employees and your teams, interact on social media, which I just think is a crazy one, but they're trying to get this broader, they're trying to talk about interests and connections, but it's still so connected to the work that you're doing. Recognition systems, etc. I don't know if you can see this at the bottom, but it is a full-time job trying to hit the right buttons to keep your employees engaged. And even then, we are enacting this state-based engagement that lasts only as long as the situation is right. So we often treat employee engagement like we're just painting a wall. We roll it on and then ask, hey, are you happy? And painting the walls is actually a state-based engagement technique that I have seen. Let's paint the walls, change the color, and people will be more engaged. So sadly, it's not just a metaphor, but as leaders, we aren't just painting a wall, but rather we are watering a seed. So a leader's role is foster an environment for employees to develop and express engagement. It's not their role to boost engagement, but to foster this environment where they can develop it on their own. So how do we do that? Let's talk about that. As leaders, we must stand for employee engagement. It doesn't happen passively, and for many, maybe even most, it doesn't come natural. These are some of the things that we teach leaders in leader development programs, but I think we need to really define it and focus on it more in terms of trait engagement and developing that overall skill, and we will begin to see some of the greater benefits. So getting back to that sense of self, increase in bringing in some of their skills and interests, developing an environment of trust, focusing on accomplishment, achievement, and nurturing a positive mindset, and then finally development and improvement. And this probably, many of you may be tuning out and saying, yeah, these are all things that we've heard before, and they absolutely are. But I want to put a little bit of a twist on it. And as you will see, some of these are still state-based. But the goal here is broadening, teaching them to develop these with themselves. And then we simply foster that environment and kickstart it. So I have a little twist on it. So I hope that you're staying with me and not just tuning out at this point. Man, this thing is in the way. Okay, so the S in stand is getting back to this sense of self. So identifying their own skills and daily opportunities. And then as leaders, we capitalize on those skills, but that's not the most important part. It is identifying their own skills and identifying daily opportunities for themselves. So the simple act of writing out what you're good at and then seeking opportunities to apply those skills daily, not just at work, but anywhere, That gives you ownership of not only the skill, but the result and the outcome, and it makes you immediately more engaged in what you're doing. And as employees begin to do this throughout their life, it increases their trait-based engagement. Now, as leaders, we then say, oh, you really have an interest in training programs. Well, let's see how we can get you involved in that. In the meantime, you keep seeking opportunities to do this on your own. But here at work, we are also going to do that to help you with that state-based engagement as well. We must understand their interests inside and outside of work and help them see the connection of work to a greater purpose. So having those one-on-one connections where you talk about more than how their job connects with the goals of the organization. That's great. A lot of people just don't get super jazzed up about that. We like to think they do. We like to try to force that on them. But the reality is, I'm sorry, I worked in home improvement for a very long time. I don't care a lot about home improvement, but I do care about customers being able to get in and get what they need. And I also care about the employees being able to do their job well and how I can support that on a daily basis. So when I connected with what I was most passionate about, then my engagement skyrocketed, as opposed to trying to force what you think I should be engaged in, which is what we often do. Make sure I gave you a chance to interrupt me if you need to. And the important thing here is to recognize and remember that the employee's skills and interests are not in competition with you. And as we help leaders understand this, then they can fully jump in and become more part owners in the employee, bringing in those skills and interests and using those, that ocean, just keep dropping pieces of dye into the ocean, and over time we have a different color. I recognize we're never going to dye the ocean. Maybe I should use lake or something instead, or a river in Chicago. But by tapping into the entire ocean of possibilities, we're going to have a greater chance of increasing trait state engagement. And this gets back to Kahn's original definition of engagement, which was this sense of self, skills, and interests. Any questions or thoughts on this so far? All right. Trust. Trust is huge, and it is huge for state-based engagement. Absolutely. This is definitely one that really lends itself well to establishing an environment for engagement. I would like to take that a step further and help employees build trust in their lives around other people in general, which increases their ability to engage on a trait level, which only helps with the state engagement. So true engagement cannot exist outside of trust. It simply cannot. And we recognize leaders' role in removing barriers and obstacles and being that person that clears a pathway for employees. Connecting with teamwork and connection. Now, I'm not talking about parties and events and things that bring everyone together and make them happy. Yes, that may momentarily improve the mood, kind of get their minds off of the work they're doing, but that is not long-term. That's not lasting. When I talk about teamwork and connection, this is building strong team relations, having opportunities for them to work together, to achieve together, and to build trust with others. If an individual does not know how to have a trusting relationship with another individual in any area of their life, they will not know how to have a trusting relationship with their leader or their coworkers, which will always put a barrier in engagement in the workplace. So we want to teach them the skill of teamwork, connection, and trust outside of the work environment as well. And so putting in these opportunities for them to do that is a great way. Learning how to depend on others and also how to be a good team player. This transcends the work that they're doing right here. It's also important to hold team members accountable, and that includes yourself. It's hard to have trust when you say this is what we're going to do and this is what I expect of everyone, but then you let people slide or you don't even meet your goals as a leader. You will never be able to establish that trust with the employee. And then teaching them how to make reasonable commitments so that they can uphold those, and I'm going to talk about that a little bit more in setting realistic expectations. And then just recognizing that work is one piece of a larger pie. If they're not in it today, trying to force them to snap out of it, come back over here, focus on your work. I don't care if you're going through divorce. I don't care if your kids are sick. I don't care if your car just broke down and you don't know how you're going to pay your bills. You need to focus right here. That never works. They're not going to be able to focus in this moment. They may be able to power through a project or get something done, but overall engagement is diminished. Their morale is diminished, and you have not taught them that they can trust you, that they can depend on you. And it just goes to show them that they can never trust anybody in any situation, and it damages their trait-based engagement as well. So recognizing that work is one piece of a larger pie is critical for engagement. And they must trust you enough to share their interests, goals, and desires. I would love to know how many of you have complete trust in your leadership, but also recognize that just asking you that question, you must have a certain amount of trust to even be able to say that. So just think about the trust that you have for your leadership or for those around you. If maybe your home environment or a community practice that you're involved in, how important is trust in your engagement with that organization or that group? Okay, now let's move on to A in STAND, which is accomplishment and achievement. So I'm taking this a step further. I just, sometimes you have to make acronyms work, but this is about teaching them how to set appropriate goals and reasonable expectations. Often in organizational settings, we have goals outlined for them, and then we say, okay, align with these goals, or create a couple of goals that align, and I'll review it and check into it. And oftentimes we don't go further down and say, what are reasonable expectations for achieving that goal? Even if it is appropriate, we do whatever we have to do to make it happen, even if it's working 50, 60 hours a week. But what's realistic and what's reasonable, and how do you set appropriate goals, not just in the workplace, but at home, in your own hobbies and side gigs, and with your own community work? How do you set a goal? What does that look like? And how do you establish reasonable expectations? If you are constantly missing at home, it's hard to come in work and say, oh, I got it here. I'm not so good at home. I miss every deadline and every goal I set myself, but I can do it here. No, it flows over and it affects you at work. So teaching this skill is going to impact outside of work, but also influence work as well. And this incorporating opportunities for frequent and consistent wins is so important. How many of you have gotten to the end of the day and you're just like, what did I accomplish today? In my planner, I have a spot where I'm supposed to write down 3 accomplishments that I had. And sometimes it's a real stretch. I have to say, I fed my kids. I actually put normal clothes on today, and I made some progress on one project, but what that progress is feels so small in the grand scheme of the project. So I still feel somewhat like a failure. So we have to identify ways to have regular wins on a daily basis. We need to be able to go home at the end of the day and say, I did this. I succeeded in this way. And so leaders helping employees establish those opportunities, those how to outline what those frequent and consistent wins can look like is really important to trait-based engagement. Now, many of you may have heard speech talking about the importance of making your bed every day. And the premise of that is, if nothing else, you made your bed, and that is a win. And so leaders can implement something similar. Just clear out your inbox. Ugh, I hate to even say that, I've got thousands, but respond to everyone that messaged you today. Clear out your voicemail. What can you do each and every day to have one significant win, if nothing else? Okay, and then recognizing accomplishment appropriately. 69% of employees say that they would work harder if they were better appreciated. And a lot of leaders try to say, okay, I'm going to recognize everyone in a weekly meeting, a quarterly meeting. Not everyone wants to be recognized publicly. They don't feel like that is appropriate recognition. So the golden rule, if you're familiar with the golden rule, says that you treat others the way you would like to be treated. But the platinum rule says treat others as they would like to be treated. It's not about you. It's not about how I think that I should. I want to give everyone a cake at the end of the week. Well, not everybody likes cake. Not everyone thinks that that is recognition. Some people just want you to stop by and say, thank you, good job. Some people want a thumbs up on the way. Have coffee with me. Recognize me in public. Know your employees so that we can appropriately recognize them. And this also teaches them the skill of recognizing others. Did we have a question or anything pop in before I move on? All right, almost done. How are we doing on time? Okay, so the N in STAND is nurture a positive mindset. And this sounds a little bit hokey, especially to a lot of Americans. We don't really buy in yet to this idea of optimism, we love happiness, but mindset is just beginning to really see some movement outside of hippies, it seems. So this is so important. It just is the biggest part of trait engagement and overall well-being. And so it would be amiss if we did not talk about it here. So inspiring optimism, providing an environment of generosity, gratitude, appreciation, and actually practicing optimism. All three of these go together to really have this greatest influence. And in order to help people bring it out of this realm of energy and aura that we sometimes have a hard time grasping onto, I like to talk about it in terms of changing of the brain chemistry that living optimism, generosity, gratitude, and appreciation really do. It changes the chemistry and the neural connections in the brain when you are experiencing optimism, looking for the positive, being generous with your time and your energy, thanking people, and being grateful for what you do have in your life. Sometimes we call that counting your blessings, but just recognizing what you do have and showing appreciation for that in others. It creates an environment in your brain where it starts to scan the environment for positive, for uplifting, enjoyable things. And as leaders, we want our employees to be scanning the environment for the positive and blocking out some of the negative. There's always positive and negative. We will never get away from that. But if we can establish an environment where employees just naturally look for the positive, we could really change the face of engagement. And so by doing this, we are also opening up the brain and knowledge and memories and information so that we can actively make new connections with that. When you are in a state of negativity or seeing less optimistic, we'll say that. Some people call it realist. It actually closes off part of your brain so that you're not able to tap in and make connections. But when you are positive and optimistic, your brain is firing on all cylinders and you're making connections with information that you may not have even thought about in years. But it opens up. Suddenly you think clearer and you think faster. And it is a huge productivity booster. So having leaders who can encourage appreciation of each other, encouraging generosity, gratitude, and then practicing optimism themselves will make a huge difference in trait-based engagement. Also state-based, but we are developing skills and abilities that transcend the workplace. They will go home happier looking for the positive. You can't just suddenly turn off your brain to where, oh, I'm looking for the positive here and not there. Same if they can practice it at home. Practice gratitude, practice appreciation. It will spill over into work and they'll walk in and be like, wow, these walls are pretty. My desk is cozy. My coworkers are quiet. I still may not like them, but they're quiet. You start to see the positive and it flows back and forth just like the ocean. And it's incredible. And I love that. And I could talk about it all day, but I will move on to encouraging a locus of control. An internal locus of control. So what this is, Um, internal locus of control says, I have control over what happens to me. I can impact the outcome of something. Things don't just happen to me. That would be an external. Things happen to me. But internal says, I actually can influence this in some way. And it has a profound influence on engagement. People with an internal locus of control tend to have higher trait engagement, which is important. And internal locus of control can also be developed. Now, attribution theory is the idea of attributing internal or external factors to success or failure. So some people say, gosh, my leader is never happy with anything that I do. I can't do anything right with them. I'm such a failure because I can't do anything right, versus, gosh, she just doesn't like me at all. Internal versus external. And there is a certain amount of appropriate attribution that we should do. There is a balance. There's always a balance. And so this is an interesting dynamic of promoting internal locus of control, saying I have some control over what happens to me, but also appropriately placing internal or external factors of success. And there is a balance. And as leaders, we can promote an appropriate balance here. When something goes wrong, we can sit down and talk about what was your role in that, and let's talk about what was not your responsibility. Take that off of your plate. You do not need to heap all of that on yourself. If there was a budget cut or a change in leadership that had nothing to do with you, the employees need to know that. But they also need to know what they can control and maybe what they could have influenced. Now, women tend to take on more responsibility in terms of attribution. We tend to take on more blame or look internally more so than men do. So men have a step up, but it is still something that we all need to work on to say, how do we appropriately apply external attribution? It looks like we've got some action going up here. Here we go. Do we have some chats I should be looking at? Oh, practical employee steps during COVID. Okay. Is it true that recognition play a vital role? Realistic skill or optimistic skill is more required? Yeah, recognition does play a vital role, not just receiving the recognition, but then recognizing others. Appreciation is a critical aspect of well-being. So anytime that we can be appreciated for the work that we're doing, our well-being increases. We start to make the connections between the work that we're doing and outcomes, which also promotes an internal locus of control. We see the results. We see that someone else cared about it. It helps us attach meaning and purpose. Somebody cared. I did an awesome job and it made a difference in somebody's life. All of that is critical for engagement. It's also critical for us to appreciate others. That goes into generosity and gratitude. And anytime we can do that, it begins to transform our brain and allow us to see things more positively. It is related to overall happiness, which is important for engagement as well. And it gives us this uplifting sense of my life has meaning, I have purpose, I want to keep doing this, it's working for me, it's working for others, and it helps people build a connection with their overall purpose of life, which is important. So practical employee steps during COVID-19. I do have an entire blog on this. I'm pretty passionate about uncertainty. For most of my career, I was responsible for laying off people during downsizing, reorganization, and I've laid off hundreds of individuals. And there are definitely a number of steps that employees go through when they are left behind, in certain sense, survivor guilt. And I think as a country, we are all experiencing a little bit of a downsizing right now, in terms of being locked away. We're not able to connect with people who may be downsized in their job or may be getting sick and kind of removed from the natural flow of society. And so there are a lot of emotions that go with that, and some process steps that we're going to come through. Building trust with these employees is a critical step during times of uncertainty and crisis, letting them know that work is not the most important thing for them right now. And if you help them understand that they need to take care of what what is most important right now and do the work when they can, they will fold that back in. Now, some employees will take full advantage of that, but for the most part, your employees want to do a good job. They want to contribute in a meaningful way. And if they know that it is important and that they are appreciated, they will fold that back in to their work. Overtime might not happen immediately because everybody is going through a lot right now. And recognizing just the many struggles that people have. Now, for leaders, I think it's really important to share as much information as you can. That's a sense of trust building, but also helps employees recognize their place in the greater picture. And during times of downsizing, this is really huge because they think that you have information that you may or may not have. And so being open, sharing all the facts with them, and in this situation is the same as we're reestablishing how we're going to work in the future, reestablishing how, what the new normal looks like. As much as leaders can share information, real-time information, that is going to do a lot for helping employees maintain their level of engagement, but also kind of begin to climb out of this a little bit. I may touch on this a little bit more, but I'm going to see what else we have. Did I hit well, remote working? Okay, I think that, okay, good. I think we're all caught up. Yes. Okay. Cool. I'm going to keep moving on. And if I missed a part of that question, I will love to try to take another step at it. Okay, so where was I? As leaders, we can influence the development of locus of control and appropriate attribution, talking through failures and wins, and helping them transfer that to all areas of their life. Got it. And development and improvement. So this, we love development in organizations. I just want to make this broader. And I think you're going to see how we're moving it from state-based to trait-based. All right. So one important aspect of engagement is this notion of continuous improvement. And this also goes back to helping employees develop this internal locus of control as well. They must constantly be seeing that there's opportunities to improve and that their voice matters, that they can control, that they have a sense of ownership in their projects, their team, the organization, the department, whatever it is, the program that we're using. It shows a sense of respect and trust for the employee, and also appreciating the skills and the interests that they're bringing into work. Some employees love continuous improvement, and some of them don't care at all. They just want to do their job. But those that are actively working on continuous improvement tend to be more engaged, not only in their work, but with the organization and their life as a whole. So if we can promote that, we're bringing in what they are already good at and interested in and promoting that, which is huge for engagement. Encouraging development. So I had to add on here personal and professional. So as leaders and organizations, we're pretty good at professional development because we see the direct impact that it has on us. If we want you to learn a new program, we teach you that program. If there's a new competency that we want you to have, then we're going to teach everybody that competency. But we're less good at recognizing the connection between personal development and the work that they're doing and engagement. So by understanding their interests and their skills, we can start to capitalize on this marriage between personal and professional and where there's overlap. So one of my organizations, I really love to teach and I love to give presentations, and I love to help people learn. So it wasn't part of my job. There were certain aspects that we had worked in, but they signed me up for a Dale Carnegie speaking program, which is a really kind of prestigious and organizational setting training program. It's very in-depth, and I was so blown away by their interest in in my own development, that I then went on and I did more training with the organization, part of extra role work. It wasn't part of my job, but I was able to do that. And I was better in my personal life in terms of the things that I really wanted to do. It helped me be a better lecturer, and it helped me to be a better speaker on, in the different arenas that I wanted to do. So it crossed over, but I was so attached to that benefit, and I was so appreciative of that it immediately boosted my state engagement, but then also helped boost my trade engagement, because I was applying a skill across the board that I was passionate about, not only in my work, but in my personal life as well. Let's see, supporting problem solving through a culture of innovation and creativity. These are two words that we throw around a lot in the States. I'm not sure if y'all do as much in other parts of the world, but we love innovation and creativity. Unfortunately, we don't understand really what it is. We think that it is having brainstorming sessions and the opportunity for people to put in suggestion boxes and give away promotions for people who come up with these great ideas or save the company money. And there's so much more to these two words, innovation and creativity. And it is related to problem solving and also a level of risk that the organization and leaders are willing to take. You cannot say that you are promoting innovation and creativity unless you are willing to take on risk and establish this environment of continuous improvement and be open to new ideas and to feedback and potentially painful information. You have to be willing to allow employees to fail. And they have to know that they can trust you enough to respect and appreciate their attempt and talk them through the different aspects of that result. So there are a lot of things that go with that. We're also incorporating challenges and stretch assignments. So engagement is the state where skills are perfectly aligned with challenges. So as you develop skill for your employees, you start to develop them, you also have to keep up with the challenges. Otherwise, there's not a balance of skill and challenge. And we love stretch assignments, but often we don't upskill our employees enough to be able to handle that. So they get overwhelmed and burnt out, and they like, God, I can't do this. I'm such a failure. Not only am I a failure at work, but I'm also a failure at home. How can I plan on starting a business if I'm not even good at my job? When that's not the case at all. So it starts as state-based engagement, but it just rolls downhill. As you can see, that ocean is still flowing. So if we can help them establish challenges, stretch assignments that meet their growing base of skills, we will have an employee that is constantly growing, constantly developing, and we have this nice balance where they're just becoming a powerhouse employee, and they will be so attached to the organization and to this team because you are helping them grow. You're helping them be their most self-actualized self. And I'll try to move on quickly. Promoting resilience. Resilience is so important, and this is your ability to bounce back. So in the moment, we can't be engaged in the moment when we're living in the past. It is hard to be engaged when you are constantly living in the past. So that's state-based, but building this ability to bounce back in general is a trait-based ability. So how many of you have sat at your desk in the morning and you're just like, oh my goodness, I had a fight with my spouse, I overslept, the kids spilled milk everywhere back when we were commuting, traffic was insane, there were 3 wrecks, I'm late, and I cannot focus on anything. And you sit down and you're just still so overwhelmed with what happened in the past that you can't be in the present moment. And you may be able to bang out some work. I'm not saying that you never do, but it is really hard for you to get fully engaged in the moment if you are still living in what happened earlier today. And then you go home and you're still upset about what happened at work. So this ability to build resilience is critical for engagement across the board. And if I could just say one thing that you would do is to develop resilience and your ability to bounce back. And part of it is compartmentalization, and to say, okay, I'm focused right here. I can deal with that when I go home, but I need to focus right here and to get back in this moment, or to understand trauma and failures of the past and say, I'm a different person, I'm moving on, that cannot affect me anymore, I'm going to start fresh. So resilience is key to being able to move forward, to engage in this moment, and then engage across the board. I think that is all I have for that. So in summary, it is not the leader's role to paint the walls and to boost engagement and to say, here is a pretty picture, now everything is right, I'm aligning the stars for you so that you can focus. Rather, it is their job to till the soil and to fertilize and to water the seed, because only the seed has the power to grow. So in the beginning, I talked about my friend who met with me, and he was so generous with his time, and he set aside his frustrations, and he just spent a solid 45 minutes talking to me about my life, something that would not come back to benefit him in any way. He was 100% present with me regardless of what his frustrations were. Years later, I had a colleague who happened to work at that same consulting group. And so I asked if she knew him, and indeed she did. And she shared with me that some years after my encounter with him, that he had developed ALS, or Lou Gehrig's disease. And for those of you who may not be familiar, it's a neurodegenerative disease that affects the motor neurons. So you slowly start losing control of your motor abilities, and then it eventually affects your organs and your entire body. So what started as a slight trip, he was shuffling and just tripped out of the blue. Within a year, he had moved into a wheelchair, and eventually his body completely shut down and he was gone. And he had, when he found out that this was his diagnosis, he took time away from work, and he spent that time with his 3 daughters and his wife. His daughters were still in school, and he traveled and he spent time with them. I have no doubt that he was 100% fully present with his family, just like he was for me, because that is trait engagement at its finest. And if we can capitalize on that, we not only impact the organization's success, but we impact the employee's life as a whole, and the success that they experience in life. So time marches on, and you can choose to be engaged or wait for the situation to be just right. But I hope that you choose engagement and help your employees choose engagement. So that is all I have. Let me take a look up here in the comments and see if I was able to address. Okay, while I answer this, okay, I'll start from the bottom, and I don't want to miss. Well, I'll just start from this one. Okay, most of employees that are not giving importance to personal and professional development only give important attributed work, and this is one prime reason for engagement. I'm not sure if this is a statement or a question, but yes, organizations absolutely do typically focus on professional development, because we can see a clear connection to the role. And as leaders in the organization, as HR professionals, it falls on us to help educate leaders in terms of this overlap of professional and personal. And I'm not suggesting that we go out and pay for culinary classes for individuals, unless has overlap with part of their job. I'm definitely saying we need to see where the overlap is, but I'm suggesting we stop focusing only on the circle of professional and the work side, and we start tapping into where is their overlap with the individual's personal life, with their family life, with their goals, and where can we start to step into some of that space. Ultimately, it's the employee's job to move it over there and to continue to develop engagement in all those areas and run with it. But we've got to kickstart it. And as much as we can move into this realm of other areas of life, then we are going to be able to have engagement take hold, and it is going to have a greater impact not only on state engagement, which I do believe will shoot up exponentially, but trait engagement, we will start to see this increase. And overall, we will see a benefit at work. It may take a little bit longer, but if we can lift the entire trait engagement of a whole nation or a whole country or a whole organization, then we start to see those shifts that will start to come out in state engagement. It sounds lofty, but I do believe it's not too much of a stretch from focusing on state engagement to focusing on trait engagement. Oh, thank you. That's really sweet. Which one would be more effective, state-based or trait-based, or a combination of both? I absolutely say a combination of both. So immediately, if you have someone that's bleeding out in the middle of the street, you absolutely tie off their blood flow so they're not bleeding out, right? That's number one. You focus on state engagement. What can we do to get rid of your distractions, to make your relationships with your coworkers better? What can I do as a leader to help you right now have role clarity and get the development that you need and have your skills jump up to meet your challenges? Definitely number one. I need to see my leader more. I feel like it doesn't matter. I can't see the connection of my work to the goal. Let's fix those things. Absolutely, 100%. But once we have a certain level of state engagement, it is time to say, let's work on your overall health and well-being. Let's get you off the ground. Let's make sure that you look both ways before crossing the street. Let's make sure you're not in this position again to need a tourniquet. Right? So that's what trait engagement is. It's taking it a step further and building so that we don't find ourselves dipping so much in state. Because if you can build up trait engagement, state engagement has less of an impact, because even if the situation isn't right, even if the leader is terrible and they have no role clarity, their trait engagement will overlap that, and it will help transcend and make up for some of that gap in state engagement. I wish I had a visual for this. Y'all are giving me a lot of ideas here to where I can make this more clear. So thank you for that. But absolutely, trait engagement is the goal because it will make up for a lot. I was reading a book by Viktor Frankl, Man's Search for Meaning. He was, I wish I had it right here, he was in a concentration camp during the Holocaust, and he just talks about this so much, about how some people just gave up, and his engagement with life, his optimism, it carried him through his meaning. He had a greater meaning and purpose, and that is very similar to the question of engagement. How can some people be engaged despite their circumstances? And I'm blown away by these types of stories, because I can get torn up, if my shoe isn't fitting just right, and it could throw me into a tizzy, right? But with trait engagement, it's like, it's fine, take them off, put on different shoes. There are things that you can do to overcome the circumstances. And I hope that it does not sound like I was comparing my life and having something in my shoe with Victor's experience in concentration camps. But it's showing how powerful that your trait engagement can be, that even despite the worst of circumstances, some people can still remain engaged. And we see this as well in layoff situations and downsizing, how some people are so torn up and completely destroyed by the fact that they're getting laid off, and other people say, it's okay. I have a great network. I will land on my feet. I will move on to something new. I've always wanted to try something new, and this gives me a great opportunity to do that. Or I've always wanted to spend more time with my family. They naturally see the positive, and we see this every day, but that's what I'm trying to get at with trait engagement. It's less susceptible to the ups and downs. Why are some people okay during quarantine and some people are losing their minds? Some people see the positive and they're engaged no matter what, and some are fluctuating because they live in state engagement. So both. But immediately I would say state if I had to choose and someone was drowning in disengagement. Okay, let's see. What would be big challenge of employee engagement while handling employees after COVID? We are really, I'm going to move this so perhaps y'all can see that better. we're really going to struggle with employees getting back into a routine and struggling with a new work and value proposition that employees are going to have. I'm afraid we're probably going to see a lot of transitions in terms of reorganization and potentially some downsizing. I think we've experienced it quite a bit. We're located close to oil fields, and we see a lot of that already. A lot of negative impact, and so some of that survivor's guilt is going to be a significant problem. And then just establishing what is new normal. What are these new expectations that we have? How do we meet those? Oh, stop sharing screen. Okay, I can do that. How do we meet those on a daily basis? What are some things that we can do to reestablish trust and make sure that all employees recognize what their role is and how to do that? And then giving a significant amount of grace. We are all doing this together, and nobody has ever done this before. So as leaders are struggling to figure out how to lead in a new virtual world, employees need to give them grace and recognize what they're struggling with and how this is new for everyone. Leaders need to give their employees grace and recognize that some of them are homeschooling children, have toddlers at home with no childcare, maybe a spouse that is still working or no spouse at all, and trying to do it all on their own, going to the grocery store and getting snapped at for not wearing a mask or for wearing a mask. And there's just all of these different things that we're struggling with that we've never had to struggle before, meanwhile maintaining a level of productivity that could be unrealistic. So setting new expectations for what does work look like. Can I work at midnight? Can I work after dinner? Does it have to be during certain hours? Because that's not realistic. I only have nap time. Is it okay if a child jumps in on a Zoom meeting? All of these things are going to have to be taken into account as we all start going back. And I think grace is probably the biggest component of that that'll make the biggest difference in relationships, because relationship is a key to well-being, engagement, classical definitions of engagement, trait and state. Relationships are so important, and most of that is foundational in terms of trust. Let's see, did I hit all of the questions? All right. It doesn't look like I have any more. If I missed it, please pop it up very quickly, because I think we're probably wrapping it up. Is it true that recognition play a virtual role? I think that maybe I answered that one. Recognition, oh, a vital role. Yes, recognition is very important. I think I covered that. Let me know if I did not. We've got to be recognized for the work that we do. Not everybody needs it or think that they need it, but the thing is we need to be recognized in ways that we want to be recognized, that we appreciate. I have a friend who does so much for everybody, and as soon as you try to recognize her, she gets embarrassed and upset and she leaves, or she does not like public recognition, and it actually reduces her engagement when you try to do that. Very important, but the most critical part is to do it how they want to be recognized. All right, well, I'm going to turn it back over to the team, and thank you so much for having me. This was a lot of fun, and I hope that you got a lot out of it. Please feel free to reach out to me. My email address was up previously, and also I think it'll be on the recording again. So thank you. I'll turn it over.
Okay. Hello, everyone. I hope there are no more questions for her. So I would like to thank you, ma'am, for such an explanatory and intuitive session. It was great listening to your thoughts about what really engagement is, some great analytical data, why engagement is really important for both organization and the workforce, and some various real life examples also. And thank you once again for answering all the comments from the participant side. It was great session. Thank you so much from the Vecha Forum side. Thank you all for such a great participation. Stay safe, guys. Thank you.